October 7th. I'm the senior board member, so the first thing I'll do is, Ms. Duke can't be here this morning. The first thing I'll do is start with the election of the committee chairpersons. Do I have a nomination? Mr.
Jill. I'd like to nominate Jim McCammon and Julie Bess as co-chairs for the subcommittee.
We have a second? Ms. Gordon, I guess that's me. All in favor? Thank you very much, everybody.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. With that, we'll move on to the consideration of the guiding documents. We wanted to start with the existing information that the administration and the board have already put together to define what we do for communications, just to baseline for everybody, what work has already been done, and some of the basic premises that inform how we are as a board. I'll turn it over to Alan to walk through our board responsibilities, our goals and objectives for the board, and our strategic plan, as well as our board policy 9620, which describes the role and function of board committees.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, those people here, members of the community who are joining us this morning. So I just wanted, before the board gets up and running with the committee, just frame some of the, you okay, Jeffrey? Oh, okay. Just frame some of the discussion around what we're actually saying we are doing, what some of our priorities, what some of our goals are, and then the board can thereafter consider what its charge is and the work of the committee. So I'll point to a couple of things. One is the 2023 approved district goals, and that's goal number 4. So it talks about the goal itself is to enhance board and district communications. And typically these board goals are areas for the board to work at, and also in collaboration with administration sometimes. So the strategic work that's listed, I'm just going to name some of these things for the benefit of people who are in the public this morning, and also anyone who's listening in terms of what the type of the work might be. So the strategic work as defined by goal 4 talked about the establishment of the committee, which we obviously the board has already done, to provide continuity of meetings and engagement with the community, to do an audit of our communication systems, survey our stakeholders to identify preferred means of communication, celebrate the students and staff accomplishments, provide communication on the strategic plan, collaborate on shared communication with administration, and work collaboratively with the policy committee to identify any policies or procedures that would support the district communication. So that's the nature of the work as it's described under the board goals. The measures themselves sort of come out of the strategic work. That's really the completion of that strategic work, but I'll name some of these things. Community presence and voice in meetings, increase the quality and variety of the communications, publish joint communications with the board and administration. And then I'll touch base on the last one, which is sort of develop a media package that includes logos, templates, and standard sorts of district communications. So some of these strategic work and measures also overlap, which is a good thing. Some of the work of the strategic goals, strategic plan, and specifically I'm talking about strategic goal 5, and that is in your packet. Strategic goal 5 talks about strategies, actions, and measurements. And there really are 2 goals there. The first one is establish effective and open lines of communication among all stakeholders. And then 5B, that aligns district's guiding documents and communications with its core mission, vision, and values to foster coherence. I would say most of the work, any of the work that sort of pertains to this group, not exclusively, but predominantly, falls under 5A here. And in particular, invite stakeholders' feedback regarding preferred forms of communication, do the audit of current communication systems. That includes websites, social media, and other information packages, whether it's school messenger or other data systems that we use, Aspen or otherwise. And again, there's a wee bit of redundancy in years 1 to 2 to develop that media package with consistent templates. As an example, we don't have an official logo for the district, right? We use different things, but we don't have our own logo for promotion and communications. 5B, I won't really touch upon that because I think it's more administrative in nature. If the board wants to look at that and feels that there's things in there that they can assist with and help. But I generally feel predominantly it's goal number 5 that it pertains to. Those are the 2 guiding documents. The policy I just copied for the policy, the committee policy that is currently in place, which is 9260. As you know, we're going through a policy audit, so eventually we will get to the series 900 for the board and to review this, but it was last reviewed in December 9th, 2008. It basically reinforces the purpose of an established committee or an ad hoc committee and the nature of its work in terms of bringing recommendations to the board. It's fairly self-explanatory, but before we get off and running, I just wanted the board to have a copy of it. Those are the 3 sort of documents that currently exist around communications committee priorities before we sort of set sail. So I'm happy to engage in a discussion or otherwise.
The other guiding document that's even above all of this that actually John dug up is the BOE roles and responsibilities. There's a bullet: build public support and understanding of public education by communicating and interpreting the school district's mission and goals to the public and vice versa. So just, again, it doesn't outline the work in the way the strategic plan and the board goals do, but it's a core component of our roles and responsibilities. So thank you, John, for reminding us of that. Before I go on, the way that we'll structure this meeting after this is we'll go on and talk about a committee charge. You have some examples. We'll pull out what people might be interested in, and then we'll start to talk about the committee work. We'll use particularly goal 4 of the board goals to sort of frame that work, because basically what we can do is take a look at that goal, see if it does meet what we think we want the committee to do, if there's anything missing, anything we want to take off, anything we want to change, and then begin to define. The idea being that out of this meeting today, we'll really be coming up with some preliminary ideas for a charge, some preliminary ideas for our work. And then when we come back for our second meeting, that's when we begin to create more formal infrastructure. This meeting is more organizational and generative in nature, because we think that the communications committee is an important committee, but it could be really large in scope. It could be really small in scope, depending on how we define it. And we wanted to make sure that we take the time to really consider. So with that, are there any questions specifically on the guiding documents?
No, Jill, I would just make sure that when we, bring this back, we do put the role and responsibility in there, because it is only one of a small handful of roles and responsibilities outlined for the board. It's one of the key ones, I believe.
Thank you.
Okay.
And just to clarify, was that from the 9,000 series policy?
That's we actually have a separate document, BOE
Just the
roles and
roles, okay.
responsibilities. So we'll get
From there,
that.
thank
We'll
you.
get that for the next time.
Yeah, you can find it pretty easily on the webpage, Julie.
Anything else before we move on to talking about the charge? Okay. With that, item 3, discussion of the committee charge. So again, today, with the idea being just to generate thoughts and ideas, begin to form, what we thought we'd do, you had a bunch of charges that were sent ahead of time. Just wanted to have people come up with what they thought might be important components in a charge that they might want to see. We can take a bunch of notes and then send somebody back to start to form a charge, and then we can react to it next time. So would anybody like to kick it off? Okay, Julie.
Thank you for these examples, and also the initial draft for DPS that was at the end of the list, in case any of us missed it.
Oh, go ahead.
May I just mention about that? That draft for the DPS it clearly is concise, right? So there are different, these samples, and I appreciate the board's contribution to these samples. We're going to find these out. Are different in nature. Some are, they list things. Some are as a fuller narrative. I literally put that down as a sentence starter so that we're not working from a blank page simply. That was it.
Gotcha. Thank you. There were a variety of things I liked from the example committee charges. And I just kind of pulled out some of the areas that I thought we should discuss just from looking at them. Some of them defined a time frame that the committee was, that it was a 1 year, an ad hoc committee. I thought that was an interesting thing for us to consider. Are we assembling this committee to set course, and then we should be expecting to be good to go? Some of these committee charges reference policy in their charge, which is worth considering. And some of them speak to particular areas of focus for the Board of Education, for example, budget specifically. And do we want to define or identify in a charge specific areas that this group wants to hyper focus on, for lack of a better word? Beyond that, there were a couple things, kind of buckets of ideas that I liked. I'm not sure they all need to go in a charge, but just for conversation's sake. Clear, concise, and timely, I thought was nice language. There was a lot of mentions of two-way communication, which I think is really key. Sometimes it's harder to remember that communication's about listening and receiving information as much as it is about putting out information. Variety, people take in information in different ways better. So considering how we're providing that information. Efficiency, it's not necessarily about more communication, but again, about the right communication made available in the right places for the right people. And then this idea of opting in and out, if appropriate or where appropriate. So that's a lot. Not suggesting all of that goes into a charge.
Okay. Tara or John, any thoughts you want to add?
I mean, thematically, I have some ideas. I haven't crafted them into wording in a charge, but I think, I think if I'm not mistaken, that we've been talking about this subcommittee for well over a year. So I'm really glad to see it kind of come to fruition and be part of it. I think it's going to be received incredibly well by a vast majority of our constituents, especially, we've recently heard that there is a need for more opportunities to share, for parents to share their direct communication feedback with central administration and Board of Education. And I think, Julie kind of hit on it, and our role with the word vice versa, or the back and forth or two-way communication is integral and needs to be part of that charge and enhancing it. I think in terms of the charge, I think it doesn't have to be very specific, if you will, and we'll work with our fellow board members in crafting it also. I mean, I'm sure we'll take some ideas, but they'll have some great feedback as well. But we're going to need flexibility, in terms of communication. And I think back the last 2 years and we faced unprecedented challenges in communicating as a board, as a district, and we made some really kind of monumental changes how we communicate. I mean, the fact that I'm in New York City on a Zoom with I think there's about a half dozen parents on the Zoom as well is pretty awesome. And then we also implemented these public discussions on some of these higher profile agenda items. So there's going to be a multitude of ways how we can enhance our communications. I think if I look back in the past, maybe we've kind of passed the buck a bit to the parent organizations, some now considering themselves private parent organizations. So I think now is the time, and a perfect kind of time to bring this forth to the community. So I'm really excited. So I'll just leave it at that.
Tara?
Yes, a couple of things, one of the, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I like the wording of the liaison between the Board of Education and the community, and also, community outreach. I agree with John that, there needs to be more direct communication from the board to the public. The waters have gotten a little muddied, and I don't believe everyone is thrilled with the way information is coming. So I think it should be coming from the board, not from different organizations. And that may, have their way of seeing things. They can still see it through those organizations, but to see it through the lens of the Board of Ed is, I think, the best way to go, and allow them to have that direct communication with us. I think there's some, we also get emails and, such, that it would be much easier or more efficient, I think, for it to come through a communications committee than going just directly to whichever board member they know or have heard their name or what have you.
Okay, thank you. All right, there's a few things I'd like to add. One of the things that interested me as I was looking up some of these communications committees is that some are just called communications committees, but some have different names. Like you can see the Rockwood School District, which is page 2. They have a communications outreach and public engagement committee. A lot were called communication and public engagement. I like that idea of I think it speaks to what several of you were mentioning about kind of the two-way or the, just multiple ways of thinking about communication. I think also engagement gives us a little more opportunity to respond. So whether or implies that response is a part of that, as opposed to just you say, I say, there's a level of accountability to that communication. So somewhere in the charge, I'd love to see us talking about engagement. The other piece that I really liked was the promotion of information and accomplishments of the district. We do call that out in the board goals. And when we look at the BOE roles and responsibilities, that's one of the things it talks about, being an ambassador for the district, getting out there and talking about the things that the board and the district are doing. So I like the idea of, promoting things that are happening, not just information, but also accomplishments. The last one that really interested me, this South Coast Education Service District out of Oregon, I don't think it's a BOE per se. It sounds like it's an organization that serves the BOE, which is why they have customer assistance. But I liked, again, that it talked about all levels of communication, internal, external, district, stakeholder, talking about trying to be sort of comprehensive in how we think about communication. And again, it talks about community outreach, also development and monitoring of the communication plan. That may not belong necessarily in the charge, but I think that's certainly part of what we would want to do as a committee. So those are some of the things that I responded to. The other thing I found as I was doing some research is I found one that a 911 education group that talked about making sure that they had consistent materials and messages. And I think that's something sort of embedded in things coming directly from the board, is the idea that whatever our talking points are, we want to understand, they should come up here at the board, because that's what we're doing this because we believe 1, 2, 3. So then our messaging needs to come out and it needs to reflect 1, 2, 3. Again, sometimes in our process, we may have a different point of view and may talk about it, but I know I've heard of boards historically that would stop at the end of a discussion. It would stop and say, what are our talking points? Why are we here? What do we want the public to understand? And I think that concept of having consistent messaging and having the board develop it is another concept. Again, some of this at the level of the charge, some of it a little bit beyond. Okay, so with that, does anybody want to add anything? I think we have a lot of notes. We can take it back, start crafting some ideas for a charge. Is there anything else anyone wants to add or questions to ask?
Not that I think it needs to be in the charge, but just because you had mentioned earlier about budget, I think absolutely there needs to be a lot of communication around the budget.
Okay. 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 Alan or Marge, would you like to add anything at this stage?
No, I think those reflections are very pertinent.
Okay, great. So we will come back with a charge or charges for the committee to respond to next month. Okay. That move on to, thank you, everyone. Move on to item 4, consideration of committee work and communication survey. I'll have Alan talk a little bit about the survey, but again, we'll start with goal 4. We're not trying to make any big decisions today, just want to put some things on the table. But goal 4 is what the board defined as happening in communications this year. There are going to be some things, of course, that the committee does that fall below the level of this goal that we'll need to define. I think we'll come up with a goal. Then below that, we want a communications plan. We probably want a survey. We probably want something of a work plan so that we understand what we're working on. But the first thing we wanted to do was review goal 4. Anybody like to kick it off? Alan, you want to kick it off? Or you already did?
Well, I would just reiterate that I think the biggest task with both goal 4 and for the committee is actually just to get a baseline and therefore to engage the community with some sort of feedback process. We have called it here stakeholder survey, and that can be across all stakeholders. So that would be that to me crosses strategic plan, board intentions, board functions, responsibilities, and all these goals. So it's a task that I think needs to be done fairly early in the process. So I'd suggest that we would proceed with that and come back with draft surveys and get that process up and running as quickly as we could. That would be the one thing that I would pull out of this right away.
Tara?
So would that survey would have to come from the district then, because we wouldn't have access.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
then,
On behalf of the board, yes.
right.
Yeah.
And then moving forward, would everything go through the district, or would we have it as an opt-in for parents, any sort of
For
communication?
communication. So that's something I think we have to define moving forward. I think one of the things we want to do is formulate, create a communication plan. And I think that's a component we talk about.
Right.
These types of communications, what do they look like? How do they go? There are some things we wouldn't want people to opt out of, right? Like, the school's out of power. You want everybody to know, don't opt out.
Well, that's
Right.
obviously, but that would always come through the district.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yes, I think opt-in out would absolutely be a component of things we would discuss as
Okay.
part of the plan. Yep. John or Julie?
No, I agree with Alan. I think that should be the priority that we focus on first, because the feedback from the community and what they want in terms of communications will be important in crafting this as both the committee and the board.
Okay, Julie?
I agree. I think it's key. And then I think to then have the audit of current systems to kind of compare them and see where things are coming together and where they're not is
Are there current systems?
is kind of a good one too. Pardon?
You said, are there current systems?
There are lots of systems.
Okay. Alan, is that something the district can take on as well, the audit?
Yeah, well, I think I'll have to ponder how the audit and the survey just sort of how they overlap or run simultaneously. Or I don't want to take on so much right away.
Right.
But the idea of working on the survey and bringing it back for feedback from people and getting that up and running as a system and as a way to get feedback right away, I think I would work on that primarily. But I would certainly give some thought to how we might conduct that on.
Okay. In terms of,
Jill,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry. I think to Alan's point, that feedback could help inform the audit too. So, maybe not quite in conjunction, but on the heels of might be a good strategy there.
Well, I think the audit, I don't know if the district wants to take on also looking at all of the PTOs. I think it might have to be a combination to kind of merge together what is the district doing and what are all these individual groups doing. So we might need to be a combination of somebody on the committee and the district, just because of the fact that there's
A lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Otherwise, looking at the goal 4, and again, we'll bring this back next time. Is there anything anybody wants to add or subtract at this time?
I'll just mention that the board has mentioned and a variety of public settings, the idea of public comment to resolve. Maybe we have resolved as a board where it is and how it resides and the nature of it, but that type of discussion has surfaced a couple of times. If it's not to be on it, that's okay. I'm just mentioning it because it has come up a couple of times and we've sort of haven't really moved on it, I don't think, or made a decision.
We have not.
Yeah.
It was sent to this committee.
I think that's a good point. Not just public comment, but emails that are received and things like that.
Internal board communications. Okay.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. That was one of the kind of to-do items coming out of our retreat.
Yeah.
Do we want to add creating a communication plan on here?
To address those items specifically, or?
I think a broader communication plan. I think it would probably be part of the response to the survey and the audit would be.
Well, that's the whole goal, isn't it? To have a communication plan, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. So maybe as a measure, creation of a communication plan.
But I mean, we could list things like, I mean, from the website to anything else, but those things would come out of the feedback and also come out of an audit.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that one in particular, I think we could add, but I think you're right. There'll be other work. So are we, anything else?
So we're saying we would recommend adding create a communication plan to, as a measure
I
to
will.
goal 4.
I would. Are we in agreement?
I mean,
That's fine.
it seems like the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It might be redundant, but it's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
That makes sense.
Okay. All right. So our next steps, unless there's anything else, are we will at the next meeting of the board, I'll go ahead and recommend that, or we will, the creation of a comms plan at the next meeting of the board. So have you already put that packet together?
You said the next meeting, like for Tuesday? What do you want to do for
I
Tuesday?
just want to add creation of a comms plan, which the board has to vote on. Unless we don't have to vote on a measure, but
I just need to ponder that because I'm just not quite sure where it fits in the
okay.
flow of that.
So there's 2 meetings coming up, I think,
Yes,
before our
yes.
next.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. And then we'll come back with a charge. And I think we'll come back with some preliminary structure to the work, including the survey and a little further down the pike at audit. Okay. Anything else from anybody?
No.
Does that sound like a good plan?
Sounds like
Great.
Okay. All right. With that, I'll move to public comment. Anybody in the public like to?
For participants in person, please go up to the mic and the chair will announce you. Participants via Zoom, please state your name and address. Anyone in person?
Go ahead.
Jamie Zadig, 15 Holmes Court. Thank you for having me. I'd like to start by thanking the BOE and the administration for supporting the reestablishment of the Communications Committee. I think it's fantastic. I know that the charges of the committee are just a draft, as Dr. Adley mentioned, but it does state to establish and maintain effective communications among all stakeholders. So I think in addition to defining the term stakeholders and who all of those stakeholders are, I think that would be a very important starting point. I hope the committee also reviews best practices for receiving parent communication. And I think that's been said by a lot of people today, but I wrote this before the meeting. So, we have a chain of communication for the district, but it doesn't include the Darien Board of Education. And I don't think it's been effective. I agree with John Cini that I don't think it's been effective having our parent volunteers on the PTO gather feedback from parents on important educational issues and then pass it along to their umbrella organization. And that organization now has stores that are closed to the public. So I think I'm so glad to hear that, everyone seems to agree that the Darien Board of Ed should be connected with all of their constituents. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Michelle, is there anyone online?
There are no raised hands at this time.
Okay. With that, may I please have a motion to adjourn? Ms. Worm, all in favor? We're adjourned. Thank you
There's
very
a
much.
hand up. There's a hand up. Sorry. Can you hear
Oh,
that?
there is.
It was
Yeah.
before adjourning, so I didn't want to interrupt. Miss Alicia Melberg, you are recognized.
Thanks. Sorry about that. I forgot how to raise my hands. Some of my things have already been addressed similarly to the last public speaker. So I wrote this before, so I'm still just going to go ahead and say it. I'm Alicia Melberg. I live at 24 Christie Hill Road. I want to thank all of you for beginning the necessary work it's taken to recreate the communication committee. We all take public education of our children very seriously. I believe that there's a solid educational foundation for all of our learners is vital to create well-rounded citizens. For me and many others, that means closing the gap between home and school. Simplistically, facilitating a functional and reliable two-way communication between parents and the administration board of ed is key. With a first and third grader, I'm still relatively new to DPS and learning how to communicate my concerns in relation to topics, especially those topics that are considered sensitive, such as COVID protocols, masking, and most recently, school security. Most recently, I've struggled to understand the relationship between the Council of Darien Public Schools, CDSP, and the administration. I've been very hesitant to reach out to the Board of Ed with my concerns on CDSP. I'm a strong supporter of all the work our PTOs do to fundraise, raise community school spirits, and offer enrichment programs such as Kids Care. With this, I would like to ask, is the CDSP's function to facilitate the sharing of information from the Board of Ed into the parent community? And conversely, does the CDSP speak to the administration and Board of Education on behalf of the parents? I ask the above as all parents are considered members of the CDSP, but they have closed their meetings to the public. The closure of previously open meetings sends a very bad message to parents. I have also expressed these feelings on this subject directly to CDSP. I have been suggested in the past to reach out to the PTO and CDSP on sensitive matters. I personally am not comfortable going to PTO representatives on serious and sensitive policy issues. Do we want these to be bus stop conversations? I'm hoping the committee can assist parents in where to best directly express their concerns on sensitive policy issues. I offer you my thanks, and I look forward to your progress as you begin this work on behalf of our district and all students. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other raised hands?
None at this time.
Okay. All right, we have a motion to adjourn. Tara, all in favor? This meeting is adjourned.